and welcome to Very Interesting. I'm Barry Aycock, your host. We have a great show for you this evening. Our featured guest is former ambassador to Ireland, Kevin O'Malley. I also recently had a chance to meet and talk to a fascinating retired farmer turned author named John Fisher from Kennett, Missouri. But first, we sent Luke Carter back for another Luke on Location segment, LOL, this time at Bernie Farmers Gin. Luke?
Hi, I'm Luke Carter. Welcome to another edition of Luke on Location. We're here today in Malden, Missouri at Bernie Farmers Gin, and as you can tell, it's cotton picking season, which what better place to be than at a cotton gin. So we're going to go in here today and try to find out a little bit more about what's going on.
White gold. These rolling fields of cotton once sustained the Deep South, and they still do in some parts of the country. In Missouri, where it's a $70 million plus crop, Duncan County is the top producer. And Duncan County ranks 18th in the nation in cotton production. Converting that cotton into products that we use every day begins in cotton gins like the one here in Malden. Terry Dawson is a manager at Bernie Farmers Gin.
We gin cotton in an area encompassing Stoddard County, New Madrid County, Dunklin, Pemiscot, just across the line in Arkansas, and then we have a couple of farmers that we gin for, one in Arkansas, mid-Arkansas, and one down in Mississippi.
After the cotton is picked, it is carried by truck to the gin yard, where it is offloaded to await the ginning process. From the yard, the large round bales enter the feeder bed, where sticks, leaves, and other types of trash are removed. The cotton then moves to the gin stand, where the seeds are separated from the lint. After the cotton is cleaned, it is baled and readied for the warehouse. Each bale contains 480 to 500 pounds of cotton. About 4 of these bales come from one of the large round bales that arrive from the field. The cotton will remain in the warehouse until it is shipped across the world.
This warehouse will hold about 30,000 bales of cotton, and it'll be completely full when we're done. The warehouse next door will hold 21 or 22,000, and the other warehouse will hold around 21,000 bales. And last year when we got done ginning, I had about 71,500 total, and I basically had everything full.
As you can see, cotton is still king here in Duncan County. I'm Luke Carter, sending it back to the studio.
That was great, Luke. There are probably several of you out there who may not have seen the ginning process up close like that. Now you have. I had the great pleasure to spend some time with Ambassador Kevin O'Malley. He served as our ambassador to Ireland, appointed by President Obama. He is now leading the effort to elect Joe Biden for president here in Missouri. So welcome back to Very Interesting. I'm joined by former ambassador to Ireland, Kevin O'Malley.
Hi, Barry. How are you?
My good friend, Kevin O'Malley. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Is this your first time down here in Southeast Missouri?
It is not my first time down here in Southeast Missouri. I can't call it home, but I went to high school in Cape Girardeau and spent 2 years in Perryville at a Vincentian Seminary novitiate, and been down here as a lawyer many times trying cases.
So you went to seminary school in Perryville, Missouri?
At Cape and Perryville. I went to high school in Cape Girardeau in something that is now part of SEMO, but was then called St. Vincent's College. It's right on Morgan Oak Street, right where the old Free Bridge was located. A very old establishment. There's a small school, about 100 students, 120 at the height of the 60s. And then once you graduated from high school, the progression was to go to Perryville for 2 years of sort of, it's called a novitiate, but it's more monastic type training, and then on to philosophy studies, and then theology and ordination. So I was a long way from ordination.
So your career goal, though, when you graduated from high school was to be a priest, a Catholic priest.
My career goal when I went to high school was to be a priest. The seminary itself, when I left home at the age of 13 and went to Cape, and we boarded there and went home at Christmas time and during the summer. But other than that, we was a Catholic boarding school.
So Kevin, tell us a little bit about your family and where you live now.
So I live in St. Louis, and I've lived in Missouri my entire life except when I have been in government service. When I was with the Justice Department, I lived outside of St. Louis, and when I was in the Army, I lived outside of Missouri. But other than that, I've lived in St. Louis, Cape, Perryville, and this is where I've moved away several times, but I've always come back because this is where I belong. And every time I moved away, you know, my goal has always been to get back home because this is where I belong. And I feel like a fish out of water when we lived on the West Coast with the Justice Department, or the East Coast with the Justice Department, or when I lived in Ireland, which was clearly a wonderful experience. This is where I belong.
So you decided that wasn't a career path for you. What did you decide to do at that point in time?
I really enjoyed the seminary life, but it wasn't what that's not why God put me on this earth, to be a priest. I don't think I would have been a particularly good one. And so I went to St. Louis University and eventually went to the law school at St. Louis U. Graduated, went to, my first job out of law school was with the organized crime section of the Department of Justice. I went to Washington, D.C., took training there for a while, then moved to Los Angeles, California, where the rule at the organized crime section of the Justice Department was you could not do this kind of work anywhere near your hometown. They wanted everybody to be holier than Caesar's wife and have no political connections or no other kind of connections. So I was sent to Los Angeles and then worked cases in LA, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. And then did that for a number of years, and eventually came back to St. Louis. After we stayed in Phoenix for about 2 years. A reporter was killed there, and they thought that it was done by the mafia, and I was assigned to go over and try to figure that out. And after that, came back to St. Louis, stayed as a federal prosecutor for a number of years, and then went into private practice.
So you did prosecute a lot of mafia members, is that true? Was that dangerous? Did you feel like you were in danger, like where you lived?
Well, the idea was to make it dangerous for them, not for me. And so, you know, in those, the program it was set up initially by Bobby Kennedy when he was Attorney General. And the idea was to take young, aggressive lawyers and team them up with aggressive agents from the FBI and the IRS and DEA, put them all together in what were called strike forces, kind of detach them from the normal bureaucracy and just go out and, you know, do the best you could with then the Sicilian Mafia. And it was a government program that was pretty successful.
Then after you quit doing that job, that profession, kind of law enforcement, the legal side of law enforcement?
After I stopped the working as a government lawyer for the Department of Justice, I went into private practice and eventually worked almost exclusively in an area that concerned the defense of doctors and hospitals that were sued for medical negligence.
You kind of got involved in politics, local politics?
No, I mean, I did. I had been, as a lawyer, I think most lawyers pay attention to politics, and I had paid attention, but had never really been involved in it to any great extent until 2004. So when John Kerry ran against George W. Bush, President Bush, I was surprised at the result. I really wanted to change. I'm not one of the Democrats that had particular animus towards George W. Bush. I just thought that he wasn't. He was in over his head, in my view. But you know, there have been a lot of. He has a lot of detractors and people who were pretty rough on him. I didn't feel that way. I just wanted to go in a different direction. But I hadn't really done anything to help Senator Kerry. So I decided in the 2008 election, the next presidential election, I would get involved. And I have a personality flaw that when I get involved, I tend to get involved all the way. And I got involved all the way. But that was really the first presidential campaign that I'd ever really been involved in.
So you were heavily involved in the Obama campaign in Missouri in 2008? And actually, President Obama only lost by like 1 percentage vote in Missouri at that time?
2,900 votes, and we, you know, that night I remembered very well because I was in the war room. We were directed to, you know, we didn't want to recount. He had plenty of electoral votes, just go ahead.
Someone told me, I think it was Susan Montee, I think she was maybe running that year for maybe lieutenant governor. She told me there was enough provisional ballots left out there that Obama could have actually still won Missouri, but like you said, they just said, forget it, we've already won the election?
It was not a close election, and the idea was, let's just heal it up. Let's not cause any more dissension, any more conflicts. President Obama was very much in favor of trying to get people together, trying to be the president for everybody, and having a fight in Missouri for 10 electoral, then I think it was 11 electoral votes then, that really didn't make a difference. Just was a fight that he didn't think was necessary.
So Kevin, I'm going to ask you a pointed question, okay? A direct question. Most people who become ambassadors after presidents get elected are donors that become ambassadors. It don't sound like you were a big donor, you just were a big worker for President Obama.
So yes, that's a fair question, and the answer is yes. So the ambassadors come in two categories. 70% of ambassadors are career foreign service people. They go after college, they join the foreign service, they matriculate up, and a small percentage of them eventually become ambassadors. Then there 30% are what are called non-career or political ambassadors. They're all appointed by the president, but the president wouldn't know the career people, would generally know the political ambassadors. And the tradition is that ambassadors are people who have either contributed a great deal of money or who have raised a great deal of money. And I was neither of those. I didn't contribute a lot of money. Most ambassadors are very, very, very wealthy. My predecessor in Ireland, for example, was Dan Rooney, the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think most people would say owning an NFL franchise is a license to print money. But I was not a wealthy man, and I didn't raise a great deal of money for the president. He thought, and his staff thought, that I would work in Ireland, that my background would fit into what he wanted to see happen in Ireland, and that's why he called.
And we didn't cover this in the intro, but both sides of your family, I believe, are Irish American, is that correct?
Yes. My paternal grandparents came to the U.S. In 1910 with 7 kids. And my maternal grandparents came a generation earlier. They came from Ireland a little bit earlier.
So Kevin, you're kind of a rare subject on getting the ambassador's job. Most people are either donors or they work really hard in the campaign and get noticed. You weren't either one of those really, so you're really lucky to get that job. Did you solicit that job after the campaign, or did somebody approach you about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very lucky. There's no doubt about that. There were, I'm told, hundreds of people who wanted the job, and the president thought for some reason that I would fit in well because of my personal background. I knew a lot of people on the staff of the president's, and then I was called and asked to do it. I was surprised when I was told that the president wanted me to go to Ireland because that's one of the big 4 or 5 most sought after places. People really want to, Irish Americans would put Ireland first and nothing second. Other people, not Irish Americans, would put Ireland in the top 4 or 5 every time.
Well, it looks like to me one of the good guys got one of the jobs for a change. You said you weren't wealthy.
Not wealthy.
And you weren't donating a lot of money to the campaigns.
Did not.
You worked some for it and got to know some of the right people, and you got rewarded for that. So that's awesome.
Well, I was, as I said, I was happy the night that we won. I thought America made a true giant step forward. And I've come to wonder about that now, but I thought by electing Barack Obama, we really, that made a statement about the United States.
Well, let's move ahead a little bit, Kevin.
Sure.
What type of interactions, when you became the ambassador, you had to move to Ireland, correct?
Sure.
You moved to Dublin?
Moved to Dublin.
Was that culture shock for you? You've been there many times, I'm sure, with your Irish heritage.
I grew up in an Irish American family. My grandparents spoke with very thick Irish accents. There was, growing up, I thought of Ireland, I didn't think of it as a foreign country. I mean, it was just kind of like where everybody was from, because that's where everybody I knew was from. And we celebrated our Irish roots, and I'd been to Ireland before, obviously. But there is a shock, and the shock is the Irish people are for your viewers who've not been there, and you should go, drop what you can as soon as the pandemic is over with and go to Ireland, because it's a wonderful, wonderful place. They're great hosts. They're very hospitable, very welcoming, but they love America. There are 30 million Americans who have Irish ancestry or claim Irish ancestry of one degree or another. So when you're in Ireland, you cannot help but meet people who have relatives in the U.S. So you'd be you're in a pub some night and you order a Guinness, and they can hear the difference between between an American accent and a British accent. So they know you're a Yank, and they sit down and talk to you, and they say, "Barry, where are you from?" "Well, I'm from Malden." "Well, oh my gosh, cousin Seamus, he went, down and he was a bartender at an Irish bar for a while, and now he's an electrician. He's got 3 kids." And so they have an affinity for our country that is hard to describe. They want to connect with America in so many different ways. They feel connected at the level of DNA, which they are, because there's so many of us here with Irish roots. And because of the success, if an Irish person comes to the U.S. and is still here, by definition, they've been successful. If they fell on their face, they'd be back, in the west coast of Ireland somewhere, like my grandparents before they came here. So there's this real connection. And anytime I would go to give I'd probably do 2 or 3 speeches a day. After every talk, there would be, 10% of the audience would want to line up and tell the American ambassador their American story. The relationship is such that these people in Ireland feel so close to the U.S. that they want to tell the representative of the U.S. about their cousin Seamus, who came to Missouri and lived here and is happy. That's just the way it is, and it's marvelous. It had nothing to do with Kevin O'Malley. It had to do with the relationship between the Irish and our government. They really treat Americans well because they feel connected. President Obama was in Ireland a few years before I arrived. Vice President Biden came while I was there. He had never been, although he has Irish roots, he had never been to Ireland as a tourist. He had been there many times. There's an airport on the west coast of Ireland called Shannon, where a lot of our military flights stop and refuel before they're coming from the Middle East, and they refuel at Shannon and then come on into the United States. So he had never been to Ireland as a tourist. He asked me if I would research his genealogy for him, find his ancestors, and then he came over with his entire family, spent about a week with us at the ambassador's residence, and we toured and did the official stuff and the touristy stuff together.
So you got to know the vice president intimately then, because he was there with you for a week, right? Yeah. And that's how you became head of the Joe Biden in Missouri campaign spokesperson?
We don't have any paid staff in Missouri. We're doing this all on our own, and I'm probably the chief volunteer.
So you got a bargain in.
I won't get a rebate or anything. Yeah, to me, it's a matter of I'm not happy with where we're at. I think the United States of America is capable of far greater things than we're doing right now. I think that the country has coalesced behind Joe Biden. I mean, clearly all the Democrats have. Clearly the majority of independents have. And I think we're going to see a great deal of establishment Republicans have said that this is the guy that we're going to trust to take us out of the chaos and the corruption of this administration. President Trump has said, let's make America great again. That's a great theme, but it couldn't be further from the truth. He's made America weak again. Continuing on, just talking about foreign policy, we have friends and we have foes. They know who they are. We treat them differently in these last 3.5 years than we've ever treated them before. And I will tell you, our friends are confused. Our friends don't know what to expect from the United States of America. I think our foes do. That's just the exact opposite of the way it ought to be. We have had people that have stood with us, and we have stood with them for many, many years, and they don't know where we're at. They don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. One thing I learned as ambassador, living outside the United States in that kind of a position, is that everybody in governments across the planet looks to us as the leader of the free world, whether they like us or not, whether they're adversaries or allies. Everybody looks to us. We are the biggest, most powerful, most creative, wealthiest country on the planet. And people want to know which way we're going to go on a particular issue. They may not agree with us, but we're the leader. The Let's Make America Great Again people think that that means that everybody has to genuflect or burn incense to every decision that we make. And that's so missing the point. You know, we had a chance in Asia, for example. We had all of the countries of the Pacific Rim gathered together on a trade deal. Everybody wanted to do it, and we were going to be together against China.
Every farmer wanted to do it.
Sorry?
Every farmer in the United States wanted that trade agreement.
Well, it made so much sense to have everybody united together against China, which is they're going to write, whoever is the biggest player is going to write the rules. And because President Trump says, I don't like multilateral treaties because he doesn't have the attention span to read them or to keep up with them. And I think he has an inflated notion of his negotiating skills. We backed out of that, and now China can just pick off the other countries as they go. You know, we haven't made America great again. We've made America weak again, and it's a shame to watch it.
Yeah, there's strength in numbers when it comes to a trade agreement. We've lost the trade war so far, especially with China. They bought no commodities from us as farmers and agricultural people. They bought no products from us in 3.5 years. They were our largest customer at one time. Well, not too long ago.
Yes. I mean, if you're an adversary, don't you want to split up the enemy? I mean, which is exactly what they've done. China has named, now they can pick off Singapore, they can pick off Vietnam, they can pick off Cambodia, and we're out there pretending, beating our chest as if we're really running the show, and in fact, we've conceded so much literal territory plus leadership and allows somebody else to write the rules. It's a shame.
Well, Kevin, let's back up a little bit.
Yes, sir.
So did Joe Biden call you about 6 months ago and say, I need you to be my Missouri person a year ago? How did you get this job by default that you're not getting paid for it? How did you get that job?
Yeah, I'm not getting paid for it. And actually, I don't want to be paid for it, to be honest with you. I like the volunteer status. So I told the vice president that if he got into the race, I would get in with him. This was before, you know, he had decided on
He
what
came to
was gonna
St. Louis and ate ice cream at Ted Drew's about, what, 2 or 3 years ago?
So he was in St. Louis a couple times. I hosted him at our house in 18, I think. And he was here on a book tour. And he was, you know, looking around to see what would a presidential race make any sense, I believe. Anyway, I told him if he got in, I'd get in, and he got in, and here I am. I always thought that he would be the best guy, and I still believe that as we sit here in southeast Missouri. I mean, of all of the candidates that we had in the Democratic primary, Joe Biden is the most Missourian. I mean, he is a middle-class, loving guy who has not forgotten where he came from. And it's a shame, you know, this pandemic and wearing masks and being separated and all that has kept him off the road where, you know, where if he was here in Missouri right before the primary, big crowd, lots of enthusiasm, he feeds off of it. The people wanted to see him and applaud his effort. You know, we could have had him here and it would have been great, but the pandemic and the handling of the pandemic has tied us all down. But he's the best Democratic candidate for Missouri. And I think we're going to see that we're seeing in the polls, and I think we'll see it on Election Day.
So where do you think Donald Trump versus Joe Biden is? Where's the state of the race here in Missouri and nationally right now in the campaign's opinion?
I think it's close. We remember that President Trump won by 18 or 19 points against Secretary Clinton 4 years ago. So if we're 2 points down or 2 points up, that would be a huge switch. And my guess is, from what I've seen here in southeast Missouri and from my other travels, I think that the Biden candidacy resonates with a lot of Missourians. I think a lot of Missourians see him as the decent fellow that they'd like to have as our leader. I think they see him as tested, as proven, as centrist. And I think that the President Trump is just the opposite of all those things.
I want to do a wrap here, but
Sure.
You made some very good points. I think if Bernie Sanders was the candidate, Elizabeth Warren, President Trump would probably win Missouri by 19 again. And that's the reason Joe Biden's made Missouri a little more competitive than most normal Democrats. That's a good point. The other good point you made is, yes, President Trump likes to suck up all the media daily. I think there is a lot of fatigue in the country that usually doesn't happen until the second term of a president. There was Obama fatigue, there was Clinton fatigue, there was Bush fatigue. Usually it takes a second term to get to that fatigue, but I think the American people have a lot of that fatigue now.
Yeah, we paid them to do their job and leave us alone. You know, you want to raise your family, you want to have your community working right, you want to associate with the people in your life socially. That's what we want to do. We want to build a strong community. We don't want to have a president in our face all day long, and he can't help it. He just can't help himself.
Ambassador, it was a pleasure having you here today, getting some insight from you on inside the Joe Biden campaign, and it was really interesting to hear about your career. I'm amazed at how the ambassadorship works. Welcome back to Very Interesting. I recently had an opportunity to sit down with John Fisher to talk about some of the books he has written. I'd like to welcome John Fisher to Very Interesting. John is a farmer, he's a geologist, he's an author, and I'm really excited to have him today because he's done a great job of documenting various histories of Southeast Missouri. And the history really needs to be documented here because a lot of the people that, have the oral history in their head, we need to get that in books. And John's done a great job of documenting part of Southeast Missouri's history in book form. So I hope everybody rushes out and gets all of his books because they're all outstanding. John, you're a jack of all trades, farmer, geologist, author. Tell us a little bit about yourself instead of me telling about yourself.
Well, I was born in Kennett, graduated from high school at Holcomb,
Holcomb Hornets.
Holcomb Hornets, right. And attended Southeast Missouri State University, majoring in geology, then did a couple of years of graduate work at the University of Missouri in geology, but then ended up coming back to Southeast Missouri and farming for 30-some years. And after I retired from farming, then I started doing some freelance writing, and that's where we are, still doing it.
Let's get into some of your books.
Okay.
The very first book you wrote is called Catfish, Fiddles, Mules, and More, Missouri State Symbols. So, John, tell us a little bit about your first book.
Well, this book it really came about because I met a friend of mine at a writing conference who had written a book on Tennessee state symbols, and I was looking for a book-length project, and he suggested this one. So I proceeded with it. The University of Missouri Press had this Missouri Heritage Readers series of books, which are sort of general interest books about Missouri history. So I proposed that to them and published it. It talks about each of the state symbols, how they came to be, and the significance of that plant or animal, whatever it might be, to the state, to the state's history. And so it was, I really learned a lot about Missouri history in doing that. It's
And what year did you write this first book?
2003 is when it was published.
And book number 2 it's called Pot Roast, Politics, and Ants in the Pantry. From someone who's had ants in their house several times in their life. So book number 2 was written in what year?
That was about 2008, I believe it is.
And that was co-written with your wife?
That was
Carol
co-written
Fisher.
with my wife, Carol, and she's sort of a cookbook historian, and then I contributed the Missouri history, some context for the Missouri cookbooks. It's about cookbooks in Missouri.
So was there some historical foods that the average everyday citizen, a Missouri resident, don't know that's only
Well,
in Missouri?
it goes, we went all the way back to, remember Lewis and Clark, Meriwether Lewis has some cookbooks from his, or some recipes rather, from his wife
Oh, okay.
in there. And,
Give us one.
oh gosh, you got me on the spot there.
It
with
wasn't
that
the
one.
hot dog though. That was
It
New York,
wasn't
right?
wasn't the hot dog. That was more with the World's Fair in 1904, but they ate lots of wild game. You
Okay.
find lots of wild game recipes. And
So it goes way back into the beginning of Missouri.
yes. Mhm.
Then we go to book number 3, John, Food in the American Military. I told you before we went on the air, I've tried one of those MREs before,
Right.
and it wasn't really that bad, but if I had to eat it every day, I'm sure it would be not so good. So,
Well, we have a lot of first-person accounts in that book with soldiers, Marines, sailors, and some of them were really innovative in how they kind of modified the rations that the military gave them. One of the interesting things is that we found some of the best food is for the submarine crews. You know, you're isolated, and for long periods of time, they go all out for.
so they get
good food.
treated a little
They
bit
do.
better,
They
huh?
do. Right. We got to visit the in Fort Lee, Virginia. All branches of the military, their food personnel are trained there, and we got to visit actually the training facility and the Quartermaster Museum, which is there, and we visited the historical centers for all branches of the military in researching that one.
You know, there's got to be a lot of food research going on with military food, just for the preservation of it, the long shelf life of
It is, and a lot of products and processes have spun off into the civilian world as far as, well, like you have cream that doesn't have to be refrigerated, you know, the little creamers. Natick, Massachusetts is where all that research is done now.
So they have their own research lab,
Yes.
and the military does?
Yeah, they do, and it's amazing the research that goes into it, and their goal is to provide good tasting food, because food's part of the morale in the military.
I love it. Food.
Oh.
We've got a lot in common, I can already tell, because cookbooks, food
Right,
rations.
right.
I didn't get this by being on a diet. Well, John, that brings us to your last book that you wrote, Southeast Missouri from Swampland to Farmland. You know, the farmland and how the swamps were drained here in Southeast Missouri. Many people all over Southeast Missouri are curious about it, but they really don't know how all this happened. I call it the eighth wonder of the world. It's not,
Yes.
but it is really.
In a way, it really is.
So my wife is about halfway through this book. She can't put it down. It's a must-read for everybody that has any ties to Southeast Missouri, because we would be wading through water right now. Right?
Absolutely.
So the last book you have written is this book. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I really, it's kind of like you were saying, I wanted to tell the story because so many people, especially the younger generations, they look at all this beautiful farmland we have and they think it's always been that way, but it wasn't always that way. And it took a lot of perseverance and a lot of vision on the part of a lot of people to bring us to where we are today in Southeast Missouri. And it's a fascinating story, and I really enjoyed getting into it. Of course, having farmed, familiar with the drainage districts and so on, but then learning how those really came about and what took place to organize and make that work. And it is a fascinating story. I really got into that one when I learned the Little River Drainage District records were donated to the Southeast Missouri State University archives. And I got a small grant from State Historical Society of Missouri to research that, and it was a fun process.
And as a farmer, I'm sure it was near and dear to your heart.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because
well,
people don't realize how dramatic the landscape changed here.
That's right.
It went from a swamp to $5 an acre land.
Exactly.
Now we got $10,000 to $15,000 an acre.
Exactly.
Land. So it's really amazing to me how it's evolved over the years.
It is. It's an amazing story, and it's still a very marvelous drainage system that we have.
And there's so many intricate parts to that. The people who actually had that dream back then to drain the swamp and to make this the garden basket, the bread basket of the United States of America.
And when you read some of the accounts, even going back into the 18th century of the early explorers, and they saw this and, oh, this will never be anything, you know.
And also you've got the earthquakes had something to do with it. And I'm sure that Dunklin County wasn't exactly the same as New Madrid County or even Scott County. I'm sure there's differences in the way it drains even within the county. So it's an intricate system.
Right.
Well, John, I've got bad news for you.
Oh.
You've just talked yourself into a new job.
Oh.
You're so interesting and have such iconic history here for Southeast Missouri. I'd like to invite you to do a regular segment here on our show.
I would love to. Love to talk about Southeast Missouri history.
I think young people, old people, young and old like me, well, it's a great history thing for everybody to know. So I think it'll be a big draw, and I welcome the opportunity to have you on the show regularly.
Would love to. Thank you.
Thanks for coming today. Great chat.
All right.
I'm really looking forward to seeing more of John Fisher in future episodes. Well, that does it for tonight's show. I hope you have enjoyed it and maybe learned something. Join us again next week for Democratic candidate for governor, Nicole Galloway, and more.